Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone had a good and restorative evening last night after the program. I had an opportunity to talk to many of you afterwards, and what I think I heard from most, and it's going to be a pretty good way of introducing our panel just now, was the level of candor last night from our panelists. I think that the information that you got was useful and was thoughtful, but at the same time, many of you mentioned this to me during the reception afterwards. It just felt very authentic. They were not giving you canned advice, which we all get a lot of and is not terribly helpful, but you were getting real advice from real people for whom sometimes it's worked out exactly right and sometimes less so because that's the nature of life, and finding their way through. So I think you're going to get another opportunity just like that now with a wonderful panel on a question I know is of top of mind to many of you. It came up last night, in fact, both in the panel and in several offline conversations I had about graduate school, professional school, whether, when, how it fits within your plans, and thinking about the role of a career, developing a career in public service. There are philosophical questions about that, about whether this is part of your path. There are very prosaic questions about that. Can you afford it? Should you go now? Should you go a year from now, 2 years from now? So we have panelists who are going to help us with all of that. As a reminder, I'm going to keep the formal introductions from this point relatively brief in the interest of time, but I encourage you to read their full bios in our speaker guide as you form the questions that you're going to ask. Presenting first is going to be Shane Cooper. Shane is the Senior Associate Dean for Admissions, Financial Aid, and Student Services at Cornell Law School. He leads the JD recruitment and student support efforts while providing strategic direction to the Dean of Students team. Previously served as Associate Dean for Administration and Enrollment at the University of New Hampshire School of Law, overseeing admissions, enrollment management, and admissions operations. Dean Cooper brings a distinctive background spanning military service, legal practice, and higher education, earned a bachelor's in mathematics from the College of the Holy Cross, where he participated in the ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps. I have to digress and tell you something that you ought to know if you don't, and that is over the past decades in this country, ROTC programs at universities and colleges all across the country have produced over 1 million officers of the armed services, not the armed service academies, which are obviously important institutions too, 1 million. So when you hear about what is the relevance or vitality or importance of higher education, keep in mind that we serve many functions, including a critical one for national security, which Dean Cooper is certainly a good example of. He went on to earn his JD from Cornell Law School and an LLM from Columbia University. Prior to his career in higher education, he served for 26 years in the U.S. Navy as a submariner or submarine officer and Navy Judge Advocate General, including Chief Legal Counsel in the Navy JAG Corps, Judge Advocate General Corps, and Commanding Officer at the Navy Justice School. So I'm guessing retired as a captain or as a one-star, Shane? Captain. Captain, okay. Tell you a story about a one-star who worked for me at GW Law School if we get time, but that's less important than all the advice you guys are going to give them. But I'll just tell you, everybody should have an admiral working for him because these guys understand God, country, mission before self in a way like very few other people I've ever worked with. It's a pleasure to welcome Shane, and I'm grateful to you for joining us today to share your experiences and your insights. After Shane, let me do all the introductions, and then Shane, I'm going to hand the baton over to you, and we'll go right down the line with our panelists. I'm delighted to welcome back to our panel Dr. Angel Wright-Lanier, Assistant City Manager for the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, former Executive Director and CEO of the National Association of Schools of Public Affairs and Administration. At that association, Dr. Wright-Lanier led an international organization dedicated to advancing public service education, securing funding for strategic initiatives, building partnerships with industry leaders, and launching innovative programs that encouraged careers in public services, such as those that bring us to this whole session yesterday and today. She brings that same commitment to leadership and collaboration to her work in local government. Her perspective is grounded in an extensive career in serving communities across the great state of North Carolina, where she has overseen 20 city and county departments in 4 municipalities and developed deep expertise in intergovernmental relations. In other words, she has that extraordinary gift of actually getting things done and making things happen. We forget that government, in addition to all sorts of announcements and statements, has to do that. And that's the work. And she's smiling because she knows exactly what I'm talking about, right? At the end of the day, it's not about a policy statement. It's about that pothole has to get filled or some truck goes into it. Her path to public service began with a liberal arts education, a bachelor's degree in history from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, before pursuing a Master of Public Administration from the University of Tennessee Cross State at Chattanooga, a second master's degree in management information systems, and a doctor of education in leadership and learning from Vanderbilt University's Peabody College. She has a passion for developing the next generation of public servants, and she will share her reflections on graduate MPA programs. I'm grateful for you for sharing your reflections and your expertise. Again, you keep coming back at some point. You're a lifer and you keep coming back. So just be aware that's what you volunteered for here. We're grateful for your continued participation. Then finally, we will hear from Monica Rasmussen, whose journey reflects the many ways academic exploration, research, experience, and advanced training can come together in pursuit of a career in science and medicine. She serves as the treasurer of the American Physician Scientists Association, and she's the fourth-year MD PhD candidate in the University of Miami School of Medicine's Medical Scientist Training Program. She brings a unique perspective on the graduate school journey with work that sits at the intersection of chemistry and biophysics, using structural approaches to better understand human disease. She earned her undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan Honors College. My brother teaches the medical school there, and that's just dropping that randomly. I'm going to come back to him in a second, where she double majored in chemistry and Spanish and conducted research in cardiovascular biology. Before beginning her MD PhD training, she gained experience as a polymer chemist at the BASF Corporation and as a researcher at the Wayne State University School of Medicine, studying proteins involved in heart disease. Today at the University of Miami, her research is in the lab of Dr. Mark Yeager, focusing on cardiac gap junction proteins, something I know more about than I might otherwise, because that was my brother's PhD. He did an MD PhD at Cornell, the Cornell Rockefeller program, and he worked on gap junctions, which he used to refer to as where biology met electrical engineering, and where the electricity of the system lets cells communicate and keeps us alive. She uses electron microscopy and molecular dynamics in her work. Her research allows us better to understand the mechanisms behind the conditions such as sudden cardiac death and atrial fibrillation. We're grateful to have you today and look forward to hearing your reflections on navigating graduate school and building career, both as a physician and as a scientist, the essence of those MD, PhD programs. After the individual presentations, we will devote the rest of the session to your questions about graduate school. Feel free to type your questions into the chat as we go. My colleagues on the PBK team will then call on a service scholar so that you may ask your questions to the panel. Captain Cooper, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. What a small world. As you mentioned that, I'm guessing that might have been Admiral Molinengo. I'm not sure, but
actually, it was Admiral Tom Morrison who hired
before that,
who hired Hank Molinengo. So
even small. Oh wow.
Well, since you raised that, and then I really will get out of the way. I always told Tom Morrison and Hank Molinengo I could tell when they agreed with me and when they disagreed, because when they agreed, they said yes, and when they disagreed, they said yes, sir.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks so much for the warm introduction, and thanks for letting me be a part of this panel. And I was asked to talk about how law school could fit in a public service career. So if you bear with me, I'm going to share a few slides to help guide the discussion and cover a lot of those top topics that was previously mentioned as you consider law school and how that could fit in a public service career. So first, I'll hit the screen. Just please let me know if the slides show up. I think they do. Yep, I see them. Good. And if you don't mind, I might be looking a little bit off the screen here just as I look at my other monitor as I talk. All right. So first of all, ask yourself, of course, a big question would be why law school for a public service career? And as I'm sure many of you know, the law touches every aspect of human life, right? And promoting the rule of law and how society can rely on the rule of law to set expectations and to promote, our society and our democratic ideals and values. I think are key and probably, inherent to everybody in this group. I'm sure knows that already. What I think the career in the law can do is it really gives you the skills and the tools, the specialized knowledge, the professional backing, and the licensure to be able to act in this arena. That you can use it as a platform and access to advocacy and problem solving in a unique way, using the law in that way. The law is a way to shape institutions and government, of course, but it's also at law school you get the tools to help navigate those institutions and government through the use of law. That's broadly speaking. Now, more direct, when you think of exactly how it works out, of course, we think of lawyers as providing direct representation to clients in a whole array of ways. But if you think of it in the public service sector, particularly in the events going on today, immigration law is of huge area of activity at the moment and an opportunity for public service there. Always in the criminal law sphere, public defense, both on the government and on the individual side, as well as safeguarding and protecting civil rights. Beyond direct representation and providing that to institutions and individuals, you see a lot of people with JD degrees working in the policy implementation enforcement world. Whether you're a U.S. attorney or a state district attorney or attorney general or working in tribal government agencies, or if you move out of the actual hard practice of law, but use that legal experience to be able to shape and inform policy, to draft legislation, to engage yourself in larger class-based impact litigation. There are so many ways that you can use your law degree and your career as a lawyer, both as in direct use of your license as an attorney or converting it in some other way, either early on or later on in your career. So then you think through the pathway, and I'd like to break it down in three phases: before law school, at law school, and then after law school. So let's think about it first as before law school. You're really, I encourage you to do the things that you're passionate about, get involved in the activities that you care about. Anything that you do, as long as you're making useful, it's a useful experience and you're making the best of the time you have and the resources you have, it will all fit just fine in a law school application. So I don't offer any sort of cookie cutter formulaic approach to refine your resume or refine your experiences or to curate a set of experiences to be able to be the perfect candidate for a top law school. That's not the way that I would recommend it. Our best law school applicants, the ones that we admit at our law school and other great law schools, are those people that we can see are making the best of their situations and are industrious, are have a hard, strong work ethic, are engaged in their community, are kind, are professional, are civil to their colleagues, and want to do the best for society and for each other. So as you think about before law school, we're looking for people that have a sustained commitment to causes or to something that, and it doesn't have to be the law. You're demonstrating in some way, shape, or form leadership, initiative, real world impact. The fact that you're scholars in this program is a huge piece to being able to at least signal to us that you are that type of potential law school candidate. I think if you're thinking about public service for sure, then you already have service-oriented ethic and an interest in service-oriented activities. And a starting bottom line prerequisite in all of this is that you have demonstrated academic potential so that we feel that you'll be successful in law school. All right, so now you're in law school. Maybe, theoretically. Let's think about that. If you are in law school and you're thinking about public service, I strongly encourage you, when you're thinking from a public service lens, to look at the experiential learning opportunities at law schools. Typically, in your clinics and externships, where you are working with live cases under the supervision of faculty members. More often than not, those clinics and externships tend to be with public service oriented organizations or with public service causes. I know I can speak, for the clinics and the externships that I typically have worked around or have been aware of at law schools. Those are typically great opportunities for our public service oriented students to really get a feel of what the work would look like, but also to build their resume in law school so that they're now competitive for those public service jobs afterwards. In almost every law school, you're going to see public interest organizations, student groups, as well as law school administrative backed groups to help you and guide you in that arena. Many career services offices have public service directors so that they're specialized in helping you find those careers. I point this out for New York State as just a specific example. We have a pro bono scholar program, which allows, by New York State law at least, to take the bar exam a semester early with the commitment that in your spring semester of your final year, you would do 500 hours of pro bono legal services work for organizations. And by doing so, you'd have the privilege of taking the bar exam early. It was an initiative by the New York Supreme Court, one of the previous leaders there, to instill that program in New York-based law schools. So I'd encourage you to think about that as a possibility. It's kind of a rare program, but it's at least something to consider. And then after law school, so many ways you can serve in the public interest. You could work in the government, state, tribal, federal level. You may work for a nonprofit or non-governmental organization, so that's possible. You could work in the criminal law arena, serving clients, or on the government side in a prosecutor's office. And then many, or not many, but I would encourage you to consider at a law school to consider serving as a judicial clerk. And a clerk for a federal or a state or a local judge is a tremendous way to learn from an experienced jurist. And it is viewed to be a prestigious position to have as a young a lawyer in the first few years of your practice. And then that typically blossoms to other opportunities, particularly in the public interest sphere. Those that serve as clerks tend to do very well if they're looking for public interest jobs. And then last but not least, I do want to mention this because I see it sometimes at our law school, and I try to get away from this thinking, this binary thinking, that it's either private sector, large law firm, or public interest, and neither should the two ever cross. And to be realistic, when I talk about finances in a moment, that's actually not the way this could go. You could start in the private sector for financial reasons or personal reasons or developmental desires, because you can learn a lot in these large law firms. And then within a few years, after you build some financial strength or after you've built the experience you've had, you then follow perhaps the initial passion you had when you decided to go to law school to serve in the public interest. Or you might be very active in the pro bono work of that particular law firm that offers a pro bono portfolio. So I don't want to turn this into a thing where it's all public interest jobs only. I do think there is a pathway to ultimately public service that can start in the private sector with some time. All right. Another key question: if you're in undergrad now, do I go straight through now, or can I work first? And my main message to all of you is law school will be here. We'll be here. We'll be here in 2030. We'll be here. I hope, I'm knocking on wood, we'll be here in 2040. We will be here. So if you are not firmly set to go to law school right after college, then I encourage you to go off and do something else. Go work. Fulfill your passions. Do something productive is all I ask you to do. Don't go off and do nothing. Do something productive with yourselves as you build up your range of experiences, life experiences, maturity, perhaps financial strength as well. And then I guarantee you that 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 years later, when you apply to law school, you're going to have a very strong application just because of the time you build up in doing that. So for those of you out there that are thinking about taking some time between undergrad to law school, that is absolutely great. I I think that there is an argument out there, particularly now in the current competitive law school marketplace, that people feel that they may be a stronger applicant for doing so. I'll buy into part of that, but I will temper it by saying that for those of you who feel that you are ready to go right after college, there is also a pathway for you to do it that way as well. I would just suggest that if you decide to do this right after college, that you would have a clear motivation for doing so, that it can help, that you have that academic momentum going for you, and that you've built up a broad range of experiences and insights, and developed a sense of maturity while you've been in college, leading up to this, that makes you feel ready for law school. So I'll give you an example. At our law school, about a third of our students go straight through, and about two-thirds of our students have some sort of prior experience. And that tracks generally with the proportion of the applicants that we get. So I really don't buy into there's an application boost necessarily. I think we get great people of all ranges, whether you're right out of college or with a few years after. I think this question of apply now, work first should not be based on your admissions strategy per se. I think it's about who you are, where you're at in your developmental phase, where you're at with your sense of clarity of purpose. The less clear you are, then I think I might suggest waiting then a little bit for law school. Or there may be other life circumstances that would drive you to that decision. So definitely a personal question, and I just offer a few ways to think about that question. Then the big part for public service, particularly for public service jobs, it's your financial strategy. Because I will be very candid, and I heard that it was candid the other day. I always try to be candid myself. The finances will drive typically your career decisions after law school. And so the more debt that you're under, the more financial pressure that you're under, on the average, what I see with our law students, the more likely they are to work in the private sector than they are to pursue public sector jobs. That's not true in all cases for sure. But I just think from macro level, I think I can say that it is a pretty broad statement. So what does that mean for you if you're thinking about public service? You really do need to think about the finances, and do so early on. Most law school applicants spend a lot of time on, rightly so, LSAT prep and admissions and how do I stand out and how do I get into law school. And then they spend a really small amount of time, in my experience, on the financial aid part and how do I pay for it and what do I owe when I leave. And I really would like to try to flip that model, or I keep trying to flip that model when I work with students coming in. I think it's all about thinking about the finances too as part of your decision making. So first, let me tell you some other truths, or at least my belief in the truths. In the law school market, unlike the undergraduate scene, academic scores tend to drive scholarship and financial aid. It typically is need-based in the undergrad world, but in the law school market, by and large, a majority of schools provide grants, which means not loans, based on academic merit scores. That specifically is the LSAT and your undergrad GPA. I'm very happy to be the place where we also offer need-based aid, regardless of those numbers. So that gives me a lot of, it makes me feel good when I can talk to you about a public service career, because we do have the need-based as the safety net. But I do want to say that across the marketplace, you should be thinking that merit-based aid is driven by this. So the advantage of that is that if you have high scores and you have a high GPA, you can probably count on a good amount of scholarship and aid. And if you don't, then you don't. And so that's the thing that you have to think about when you're thinking about financial aid here. Loan repayment assistance programs. I just introduced the term. You can write it down later. There's a lot of fine print to do some research about, but this is quite important for those thinking about public service work. I look at it as financial aid after you graduate for young alums. What this means for a school like us, LRAP, it's a funded program by our law school. And in our case, if you work in a qualifying public service sector job, which we define more broadly than the federal government program does, like labor side union, for example, union side labor law, for example, if you make less than $120,000 per year, we will pay your monthly payment to the federal government, and in the future, your private loans to a certain level while you're in that qualifying job. And then we'll pay for a proportion of that if you go up to 150,000, which in our experience will cover you for probably 10 years. We will cover you for 10 years. And then our hope is that you've paired that with the public service loan forgiveness program. You don't have to, but you could. And the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is a way for the federal government currently to forgive your remaining principal balance after you've worked in a qualifying job, making your payments for 10 years. So it's you have to be on top of it, and you have to, and it is, there's some stress behind it. But what I'll say to you is that you can work in the public sector for 10 years. You may be managing a $200,000 debt principal, and a law school may be paying that for you during those 10 years, and then the federal government may forgive the rest of that at the end of those 10 years. It doesn't happen in all cases, but it is possible. So I just identify that if you think ahead about that, that gives a person the comfort knowing that they can work in the public service sector, which typically comes with lower salaries, and do so and do so in a feasible way financially. The last thing I want to leave you with, finances, definitely don't have the time today to really go deeply into it, is that you may be very well aware of the changes in the federal loan landscape, especially for graduate and professional programs. The law school is a professional program, so our loans are now capped. A direct federal loan is now capped to $50,000 per year. Previously, we had this program called Grad Plus, which allowed a student to take out loans up to the cost of attendance. What was fortunate about that is that it was a soft credit check. It didn't require co-signers, so it expanded access and opportunity for everyone who could take a Grad Plus loan. The reality now is that you'll be capped at $50,000, which means you have to be very careful in researching the cost of schools. And then I think you'll see by the time you're thinking of law school in the next few years, the private loan market will evolve, and there'll be a resurgence in a way that we haven't seen in about 20 years in higher education. So something to watch and monitor. It's something we're working with our students every day on to be able to make law school attainable. All right, so last steps to take, and then I'll get off the stage. First recommendation is discover your purpose and then be able to explain it if you're applying to law school. You should be able to answer the question, why law and why now? They seem like simple questions because it's only 2 words, but believe me, they're a deep question. They're very deep questions. So and only ones that you can answer for yourself. We can help guide you along the way. You can talk to mentors, talk to lawyers, talk to people you trust, but you'll have to answer for yourself why law and why now. The most successful law school applicants that we run across when we review files are the ones that have a clearer sense of that purpose. Now, I'm not asking you to do a law school essay that says why law. I'm not that directly. I just need you to know why and know those answers, know your why, and then it will come through in your personal statements and in your application materials. It was mentioned before the importance of being genuine and authentic, and I stress that for law school applications. So it's building a compelling narrative. You've lived your own life with tremendous lived experiences to date. You have passions, you have things that you want to do with your life. We want to understand that in your law school application. We're not looking for a curated resume and 27 things that you've checked off that you've done, and you're doing it for that purpose. We really want to know who you are and what makes you unique, and all of you are unique and talented. So we want to know how that is when it comes through in your application. Thinking through public service, right? I think it's important as you work on your experiences with your passions that they align with your service mentality. Those experiences that come through on your resume or through letters of recommendation about you will be clearly reflected in your application. All right, remember I talked about money and I talked about finances. So how does that work for you in law school? Okay, right now, your GPA is something to maintain, and you can't go back in a time machine and improve your undergrad GPA. So you really have got to do as best as you can in the undergrad GPA when you have the opportunity to do so. But what you can do in the future is to get your LSAT score to as high as you possibly can. I'll just be as straight as I can with you about that. So your efforts in your law school application journey should be seriously invested towards the LSAT early and often before you worry about your applications. Spend all your time and effort on it. Give yourself time to practice, several months out if you can. Treat it like a part-time job if you can. And just know that for every LSAT point that you increase by, you are gaining leverage on possible admissions offers, and then most importantly on scholarship offers. So please, please, please remember that for all of its pros and cons. I just want to be stark, about that with you, about the importance of the LSAT. Then you can research schools, you prepare your applications months in advance, and then the last thing I'll leave you with is law school is unique in, well, not unique. They have rolling admissions. It doesn't really seem to work the way you would expect it in undergrad, with these decision days, and it's all like regimented. Law schools were all over the place on our timing of our decisions. But one thing to be very, very clear about, you want to be in the early pile. Applications open September 1st. They typically close by March 1st or so, February 15th in some cases. You want to be applying by about the Halloween, Thanksgiving timeframe. Based on the way things are going right now, the way the applicants are front loading their applications. Just believe me, from being on the reader side and the enrollment side, I have more seats to offer and more scholarship money to offer typically in the fall and in the late fall, early winter than I do by spring. So I'm advising you like I would advise my own loved one. I would say, please, please, please apply by, October, November. You don't have to be September 1st. You need to have a good application. It doesn't need to be rushed, but you do want to apply in the fall. If you find yourself running late for various reasons, the test isn't where it needs to be for you, you're running late on letters of recommendation, you are going to lose admissions offers and money by doing so. So you might want to think about, let me wait a year. Law school will still be here, like I said before. All right, that's enough for me. I'm sure I'll take questions later. Thanks for listening.
Shane, you want to take the slides down? I know that's what you're working on right now. Thank you for that. I'm watching the applause emojis go up, and they should. I couldn't help but think how much I would have benefited from hearing something like that when I was thinking of applying to law school. I think I kind of wandered into, I don't know, maybe half of your suggestions over the course of law school and early on in my career. But what a benefit it would have been to have that. And I know those who listened feel that way as well. We'll hold questions for all of our panelists till the end, and we'll move to Angel now.
All right, good. It's still morning, so good morning. Thank you all for having me again. I appreciate it. I heard what you said, Frederick. I'm happy to come back at any time, so I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here to spend a few moments. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to look off because I've got my screen to the right. So I'm going to jump right in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the best way to learn about the admissions process, the graduate programs you're interested in, by telling you to ask the right questions. So I think the best way, and I've talked to other admissions officers from MPA, MPP programs that I have really good relationships with. So they think that the best way to get into your target programs is to show on your to show the applications review committee why you merit an investment from the school. So some of the things you can do is ask yourselves how I can demonstrate that I'm committed to public service. What have you or will you do to make a positive impact on the world? And when I say the world, I'm speaking local government, state government, international affairs at the federal level. There are myriad of ways to do that. So you want to just detail your commitment to public service and be able to show that, help to see that, help the schools to see that you're worth investing in. So, but that's not all there is. I think, as the person before me so aptly described, there are many things that go into this. But as you prepare for the admissions process, I want to share a few insights to help you approach the challenge with the right tools for success. So I'm going to just go through the questions. I didn't prepare a slide. I will tell you a little bit about why that is in a moment. But what do MPA and MPP programs and other graduates programs look for most in applicants? And what does a strong application typically include? Programs want evidence that you can handle statistics, data analysis, especially the top MPP programs. The importance of GRE scores will vary from program to program, as some schools weigh them very heavily as they review your application, while others don't require them or they call them optional. But top schools want to see that you have relevant coursework on your undergraduate transcript. So for an MPP program especially, that'll be statistics, economics, calculus. Also, many programs want to see some research experience. Most competitive applicants, based on my conversations with admissions folks, want you to have 2 to 4 years plus of post undergraduate experience. And there's a diversity that's like the top schools have suggested that. But they want to see that you grapple with real public policy problems, not just study them. So government, think tanks, nonprofits, consulting, international organizations that you might work for afterwards all count. I said a little bit about GRE scores, but I wanted to really highlight this. Remember that you should never have your scores sent directly to the schools of interest from the GRE test facility. See your scores first. Think about them, whether you want to take it again, and then send them afterwards. Because the program doesn't require GRE scores, or your scores are not as good as you want them to be, there's no reason to send them. Because as one of my friends told me, is once they see your scores, they can't unsee them. So I thought that was really good advice that I wanted to share. The other question was, when should students begin preparing for graduate school applications, and what types of experiences, internship, research, fellowships are most valuable in strengthening an application? So I'd recommend starting the application process, at least 12 months out. Some folks say 15 months out before the application deadline. That's going to give you the time that you need to get your professors to write references, for you to write, do a good job on your application. But hopefully, and let me just say this, because there will always be that professor that waits to the last week. So you want to give them, enough time to get your references in. That you don't want that to be the holdup. Hopefully, folks will have spent time working on issues that they care about and building relationships with professors throughout their undergraduate experience. So, you need to be thinking about, or I hope you've thought about, like which professors you would ask or approach about this. So there are a myriad of fellowship and internship opportunities available to students and recent graduates. And because I have a North Carolina lens, I'm going to tell you about one that I really think is great, and then I'll tell you about another one. One such program is the Lead for North Carolina program that aims to recruit, train, and place the state's most promising young leaders in paid local government fellowships as a means of strengthening public institutions, supporting local government communities, and cultivating a new generation of public service leaders. They've so far placed 150 leaders in communities in North Carolina. So as you heard, I think I work for the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We have Vanderbilt. We don't have that. We have Wake Forest University. My bent towards Vanderbilt there, but Wake Forest is in our community. But I had a young woman, she graduated from Duke. She had a public policy degree. So she spent the last year working with us. She did some excellent work, and they also told you that my experience is around intergovernmental relations. That's what I call my expertise. So that's dealing with grants, with earmarks. So she had an opportunity to work with us on our grant management policy. She helped us to craft our state and federal legislative agendas this year. She was also able to, go on several lobbying trips with us. So this is wonderful experience that she'll be able to use now to apply for other jobs. She wants to move out of state. I really wish I could have kept her another year, but that's one opportunity. So as you enter the applicant pool, just think about those, the fact that they'll be reviewing your resume, and an application or an experience like that would really bode well for you. There's also folks that come straight out of school into graduate school. But I want to just, if you're going to go straight in, hopefully you have participated in meaningful work and projects while you've been in college. Things that you care about, things that you're interested in, and things that show MPA and MPP programs that you are in fact a leader, as was just mentioned earlier by the gentleman that was talking about law schools. I'd also like to mention a program that I've used before and had wonderful success with. We had the AmeriCorps Vista program. I had 2 AmeriCorps Vistas It's a federal program, and I think it's been around since the 60s. But this would be great for someone who, maybe their parents are still helping them, because I think you get like $1,000 every couple of weeks, and then after you finish the program, you get a stipend of $8,000 after the program is done. So I had two American visitors, and I was able to help them work on, and they helped the city of Raleigh. I was there at the time, help us build a nonprofit capacity building program. This was awesome experience for them. We also put on two conferences for the folks that were engaged with that. We not only served nonprofits in the Raleigh area, but we served nonprofits as far down as Greensboro, and just it was a regional effort. And those two Vista workers, they went on to do other things in their career. And later on, when I was with NASPA, which was my job prior to this one, I hired one of those people that I met, and she worked for me for 3 years that I was there. So you never know the impact that you're going to have. And then finally, we as a city have our share of people that just come to us directly and say, hey, do you have internships? Do you have fellowships? So if you're in a community, say you're in New York, you have a strong mayor form of government, you would send an application or a letter of interest to someone at the mayor's office. And for those that are in council manager cities, I suggest that you send your application or your interest to the city manager's office. And then finally, because I also have a bid for the International City Management Association, or ICMA, we have a wonderful management fellowship called the ICMA Local Government Management Fellowship. And that fellowship pays $50,000, $60,000 a year. You get health care. So those are a myriad of opportunities that I wanted to just suggest. But, a quick Google search or a Claude search will turn up some others. There's also at the federal level, the Presidential Management Fellowship. And, it's really tough to get into, but it's not impossible. All right. How should students think about whether the MPA, MPP, or MPA program or other policy or international affairs degrees is the right fit for their goals? So the choice comes down to 3 questions. First, what kind of work do you want to do? Second, what skills do you need to get there? And third, what types of institutions will best support that path? For instance, if a person is interested in local government, then they should consider applying to, say, Maxwell School at Syracuse. The University of Kansas offers and is often called one of the best top-ranked MPA programs specializing in local government management. Chapel Hill has a really good program. However, if students are interested in other focuses, research or international affairs, then they should look at the U.S. News and World Report rankings to determine which schools offer the best programs in their area of interest, and reach out to those schools and then just ask the questions. And as I said before, a quick Google search can tell you, it lays out, and I pulled some of those schools after I did a quick Google search. A few schools have quality international affairs programs, amazing alumni networks, Harvard, George Washington University, Princeton, and others. I recently had the opportunity, a career-long goal of mine, to attend a 3-week program at Harvard University for senior executives in state and local government, and that alumni network runs deep. So I stayed at the Charles Hotel while there, which was really close to the John Kennedy School, right across the street from there. So during the program, I saw alumni all over the place. The month of June, I think, was Alumni Month, and there were young alumni with kids coming back. There were many older alumni that were coming back. And we, while at the program, had exposure to the former president of Ecuador. He was a Harvard alum, as well as a gentleman who was jailed for 5 years. And I had the opportunity to get a picture with him for his work to try to bring democratic values into China. He was there at Tiananmen Square, and I know that was probably before many of you were born or all of you were born. So, you probably would have heard about it. But those are the type of alumni that Harvard has. So their international reach was incredible. So, you just want to ask yourself what you're interested in, then find the university that fits your interests. All right. Next question I want to deal with is beyond rankings, what factors should students prioritize when choosing a program? Location, curriculum, alumni networks. I talked a little bit about that. I've talked about internships. Um, so I'm going to focus on a couple of things that I didn't mention while answering the previous questions. I want to strongly advise if you're moving to attend a program, it's important to visit the university to get a feel for the campus and its location. I recommend staying more than just a day. I'd ask you to do at least a couple of days. You might want to spend a weekend. So you want to ask yourself a couple of questions. Will you have the amenities you need to enjoy your 2 years in a program? And then what kinds of outlets will you have on campus and the surrounding city? So, like I said, I was just there at that program in Cambridge, and, a couple of blocks there was you can take the train and you can go to Boston, Fenway Stadium. So as the person that went before me said, you have a really long span, and people don't often think about that. I know when I was 2021, I wanted to do everything quickly, but you're going to work 30, 40 years if you choose to. So you have you want to enjoy your experience in your graduate school program. So if you're going to be there a year or two, you really want to make sure that it's a fit for you. And then the other thing that I think is really important is career services. Every program claims strong career service, so you want to ask current students and recent graduates what actually happened. Did career services know your sector that you're interested in? Did they have employee relationships? Were mock interviews offered? And how about application coaching? I know at Vanderbilt, they will, even at this point, review my resume for me, help me with suggestions. So you want to make sure that those programs are there. And then finally, you want to think about cohort size and culture. So smaller cohorts might mean tighter networks and more faculty access. And then larger programs may have more diversity, but you can feel some programs, you can feel like a number. So you just want to get a feel for what those things are like. And then what is the one thing I might wish more students understood before applying or beginning a graduate program? So this is my thing. Talking about being honest and open. So what programs rarely teach you, and what students rarely anticipate when getting into policy or local government, the hardest part of policy work is not the analysis, it's the politics, the relationships, the timing, and the institutional constraints that determine whether a good idea ever becomes reality. So you can produce a technically flawless cost benefit analysis and watch it sit on a shelf because the political moment wasn't right, the right champion didn't exist, or a key stakeholder felt left out or excluded from the process, and that kills the policy implementation. When I finished my MPA program and I started my first job, I felt defeated and frustrated because, as I just said, you put all this work into a policy only to have it rejected. And, if I honestly want to develop a course, and I will do that over the next year on how to be politically savvy, that's something you will not get in graduate school. It's not just about the politicians, but also folks who've worked in organizations and who suck the life out of young upstarts like yourself that come up with all these grandiose ideas, and then they tell you, well, this is the way we've always done it. You will hear that when you enter wherever you go, generally. You have people that have been there forever and don't want to make any changes. So that unnerved me and annoyed me. However, I later learned how to detach myself from the policy proposal. I learned that I shouldn't take things personally. It's hard to do, but in this line of work, all you can ever do is present the best policy. You can answer the questions and then let the chips fall where they may. So those are my recommendations, my commentary, and I will be here later for questions. And thank you all again for this opportunity.
Angel, thank you. interesting to see both the blend of very practical suggestions, but also a lot of through lines from last night's panel in terms of policy analysis and careers and policy. So I know for the KIPP scholars, a lot of things to think about that connect with what they've already heard going forward. Monica, MD, PhD programs, and that ever important project on gap junctions.
And what a coincidence, that your brother was working on the same thing. So
he wound up doing radiation oncology after that, but his PhD was in biology and cardio issues, and particularly gap junctions.
Oh, how cool. Let me get my slides up and running. And someone stop me if you can't see these slides. And I really just want to thank you all for the extremely kind introduction. I know I'm not nearly as accomplished as some of the esteemed colleagues on this call, but I am a bit closer to some of these graduate school decisions. So I hope that my reflections can be helpful to you all as you work to make some of these decisions. I do want to just disclaim as well that there are many ways to be successful. I'm going to give sort of my perspective and sort of on the students I've advised for medical school and for MD PhD programs. But you all are already motivated individuals, and I commend you all for being here and thinking deeply about these questions and about service. So just to emphasize what a few of the other folks on this call have said as well, my path was very nonlinear. I know a lot of the students that I advise, they really fear taking gap years, and they fear taking time off of school. The timeline for applying to medical school takes about a year, so it can be quite challenging to apply straight out of undergraduate. And I just want to emphasize to you all that gap years and alternative pursuits really give you perspective, help you gain experience that better informs the career that you ultimately want to build. So I graduated back in 2017. I worked across 2 academic labs in my undergraduate career. And then I jumped ship and worked as a chemist in industry for about 3 years. I'll talk my reflections on that and why I ultimately went back to academia before matriculating to an MD PhD program. But just really want to echo what other folks have said on the call, that gap years are your friend, and they really can inform the career that you want to build. So I'm currently finishing up my doctorate at the University of Miami within the pharmacology program. I work under Mark Yeager, who's also an MD PhD cardiologist. My research uses cryo-electron microscopy, studying sudden cardiac death and other arrhythmias. I also really want to emphasize the American Physician Scientists Association. I serve on their board to support applicants pursuing MD and DO PhDs. So if you are interested at all in MD or MD PhD programs, take a second and Google the American Physician Scientists Association. We offer a wonderful mentorship program. I formerly ran our webinar series for applicants. We have so many resources available to help students and publicize the path, because I didn't know about this path until later in life. And I really have enjoyed so much that I'm here. So I try to really, really emphasize that these resources and support exist. Just a little bit about why I ultimately chose academia. I had a really unusual path where I left industry. I had quite a few folks ask me, what the heck are you doing? And ultimately it was the right decision for me, though it was not for everyone. I had gone from my academic institution undergraduate to work as a research and development chemist. And I really wanted to get things done. What I was most excited about in industry was seeing solutions, having a faster pace. Academia tends to work a little slower. However, once I got there, I did see projects that I worked on come to market. It was really exciting. I worked on a lot of recyclable and renewable polymers that I was really passionate about. But ultimately, at the same time, and this is not a knock on my company, and the folks that I worked with were wonderful, but the goal of a company is to commercialize something. The goal is to make money. And if you don't have a business case for that project, it will die. I had several projects that I worked on that we could not convince to have a business case for the work, and projects I really cared about, the company said, you were not allowed to work on this anymore. And that is just how industry works. I ultimately decided to go back to academia because it offers so much more intellectual freedom. I focus on really basic science and fundamental biological questions. Academia is much more curiosity driven. The NIH funds the majority of our projects. There are a few other institution or grant programs like the NSF as well as AHA that support us as well. But the advantage of academia is you do not need to necessarily have a business case for something. You just need to have a plan for how to investigate something. There are so many scientific discoveries that we did not understand until later in life how useful they were. I've appreciated so much the attendance I've been allowed to have through this path. And lastly, I really wanted to combine scientific discovery with patient care. So I've had many opportunities to volunteer through my institution, and ultimately all of us as MD PhDs will be accepting some degree of a salary sacrifice in order to stay as academic physicians and just kind of move the ball forward on the next degree of really important science. So physician scientists play a really unique role in public service, bridging scientific discovery and patient care. We help to translate discoveries made in the laboratory into new diagnostics, therapies, and treatments. We drive innovation in healthcare systems and, really importantly, ensure that these scientific advances reach the patients that we care about. During my PhD, I have continued to volunteer in the student-run clinics at our institution. So Miami has a large immigrant population. There's really great need to serve the patient populations here. At our institution, we have 5 health clinics that run every single day of the week. We also have 12 health fairs at external sites. There are many, many ways throughout medical school and throughout your PhD to continue to serve patient populations and the folks that you care about. I'm going to focus on MD PhD programs. A lot of what I'm saying generally will apply to MDs and PhDs respectively as well as DOs. But I want to really focus on the path of MD PhDs because it's not a path as many folks know about. So an MD PhD program is to train someone to be both a physician and a researcher. The typical timeline is called a 2-4-2. Sometimes you'll see 1-3, 1-3-4s and things of different sort. But generally, you do 2 years of medical school, about 4 years of your PhD. You finish up 2 more years of your medical school, and then you move on to residency fellowship for about 3 to 8 years. To really emphasize, MD PhDs are best fit for students that are committed to basic or translational research and students that want to become practicing physicians. And the reason that I and the others on this call have really emphasized gap years is, I don't want to scare you all, but this is a path that's gonna fill up your time for the next 11 to 12 years. It's a wonderful path. I am so passionate about the work that I do, but if you are not sure you want to be a physician, or if you are not sure you want to be a researcher, it behooves you to take the time to figure that out before you commit to this. Because once you start on the medical school train, you should be continuing on it. So it is a wonderful path, usually about 8 years for the MD PhD, and then your residency, the shortest residencies offered are 3 years. Longest can be up to about 8-9 years, depending on the specialty that you want to do. Is an MD PhD right for you? The biggest thing looking at an MD PhD versus an straight MD is to be really extremely confident that you want research to remain a core part of your career. So for most of us, we're spending a lot of time applying for grants. That takes up a lot of your time that you cannot commit to clinical practice. So for most MD PhDs, they're spending about 80% of their time in their lab with 20% of their time in clinical practice. So if you are not sure that research is for you, I would take some time to figure that out first before you pursue an MD PhD. I also want to really emphasize that many, many forms of research do not require a PhD. If you are interested in clinical trials, if you're interested in being a consultant for biotechs, you do not need a PhD for a lot of these paths. There's a lot of training you can get to be good in research without a PhD. I knew the work that I wanted to do. I needed a PhD in order to do so. PhDs are especially valuable for basic or translational science, looking at mechanistic or basic questions. So looking at cell systems, animal models, or advanced techniques. The work that I do is an advanced technique that you really cannot, that takes 4 to 5 years of dedicated time to be good at and requires a PhD. But if you are interested in clinical trials, you do not need to pursue an MD PhD. You often can do that with just an MD. I get asked a lot about finding research mentors because that is really the most important part of this pathway if you're going to pursue medical school or an MD, PhD. You should spend some time getting in a lab. So we have undergraduates join us. At my previous institution, I had up to 8 undergraduates running around. I was at one time the undergraduate running around. So I really would encourage you, if you're interested in this path at all, try to spend some time getting in a lab. So it is completely acceptable to cold email potential mentors. Usually, like we come to expect these emails. Don't be offended if someone doesn't respond, but it is completely acceptable to just send an email straight to a PI. What I would suggest is look at your specific institution for research you might be interested in. Try to read a few of their recent papers to know what work they're up to. It's totally okay if you don't understand all of it. We don't expect you to understand all of it. You can spend some time on ChatGPT helping you through to get to the basic level of what's going on, but just at least familiarizing yourself with the work that the PI is up to. And then when you send an email, I would just encourage you to keep your email concise. State your ask right at the top. I am a student hoping to gain experience in basic science to pursue as a career path. Your work interested me for these reasons, attached as my CV. Do you have time to? All of us really love to yap about our work. We love to talk about our work. We would love to meet with you most of the time. Again, sometimes PIs don't respond, but in general, I would say PIs are the most passionate people, so they love to talk with you. Try to let your scientific curiosity drive you. You are trying to meet with any of these folks. Read a few of their papers, take some initiative, and just be excited about the work they do. So at the undergraduate level, you can look at your specific institution for researchers to work under. There are also wonderful programs like the NIH postbac and other postbacs that really are great feeder programs into MD PhDs. And then I just want to, if you are in the process of applying to a medical school, you generally should not cold email faculty that specific medical school. That's not considered appropriate, because at this point you are trying to get into this medical school and you want to be accepted there first. So different from if you're just trying to gain general experience versus if you are applying to medical school. What will happen when you apply, if you're granted an interview, you will be able to read faculty profiles at a specific institution and list faculty that you're interested in. And then you'll get paired in interviews with them and you'll get to talk with them about their work. So really be prepared to discuss why their research interests you, how your past work might connect to their lab, and what scientific questions that they're asking excite you. For specifically an MD PhD, what experiences matter the most? I get asked this a lot from applicants, and research. Your research experiences often offset a lower MCAT score or a lower GPA. We really like to see sustained lab involvement over a number of years. I list sort of just ballpark numbers to get you started, but most applicants, I would say, have over 1,000 up to like 4,000 or 5,000 hours. We also like to see increasing independence. So I notice differences in some of the students that I mentor. If you can ask questions about the work being done, be curious about the science that you're doing, and suggest next steps to sort of troubleshoot or next questions that might be asked. We want folks who are curiosity driven. We don't want someone who's just following a protocol and just trying to get an answer. We want folks who are questioning why they're doing something and are reading papers. So that's the sort of experience at the end of the day that we like to see in interviews. We also, oftentimes it's really helpful to have some tangible outputs. I know some students get really worried about having research publications. You do not need to have research publications to apply, but even just like taking the initiative to present at your undergraduate conference and just have something that shows that you can communicate your science to an audience is really important. In contrasting with your research experiences, when you're applying to MD PhD programs, you need to be separately accepted to both the medical school and the graduate school. So you need to have some degree of clinical volunteering, oftentimes less than your MD peers. I would say at least 100 to 500 hours, as well as some physician shadowing. This is really for you. You want to be confident that you like working with patients and that you want to be a physician. I'll say some of my colleagues that I see, when you work with patients, people are sick and they're not always having the best day of their life. And you need to be okay that on a daily basis, you're going to be around people who are not having a good day. You need to be confident walking in a room, having answers to questions or saying, I will help you with that. I will know how to figure that out for you. So some folks just don't, it's not until you spend time in a hospital that you understand. You're meeting someone oftentimes on the worst day of their life. You need to spend time in a hospital to understand whether that is a that you I'd encourage students, you can look into being an EMT. I worked as an ER volunteer. I really enjoyed that experience. I met with so many different people. I have colleagues that have worked as hospice volunteers, but I really would encourage you before you consider it all medical school, like spend some time in a hospital. And then I've harped on this enough, but gap years are really common. The application cycle takes about a year, so it's good to take some time to prepare some time in advance of that. I would say most students take about 2 gap years after their undergraduate. Primary applications for both MD and MD PhD programs open in late May. I really want to emphasize applying. A couple of others folks on the call have mentioned this. You need to apply as early as possible. Interviews are being given out starting in August. If you are applying late, you're missing out. So primary applications open in late May. You'll need to have medical school prerequisites. You will need to take the MCAT by this point. And then you'll write a couple different essays. You'll write an essay, why are you interested in medicine? You write another essay, why are you interested in an MD PhD program? And then you'll write a really long essay detailing just all of your research experiences. From there, schools will invite you to write secondary essays. These will be shorter and you'll answer these over the summer. The interview cycle typically runs from August. I had my last interview all the way in March. If you're accepted to any school, they will fly you out for a second look visit. So I flew out for a couple second look visits before ultimately matriculating to the University of Miami in June to do a summer research rotation. This was something I didn't know until I started looking at MD PhD programs, but one of the largest advantages of these programs is that they're fully funded. So most of these are funded through the NIH. You get a full medical school scholarship. You get a stipend for all 8 years. So most of us, we're an NIH investment of about $700,000 to $800,000 if you look at the sort of the broad funding there. There's a lot of additional benefits, but these programs really view physician scientists as a critical investment in the scientific force. The biggest thing is recognizing the opportunity cost. All of us are spending years pursuing research instead of entering clinical practice as a physician. So I'm giving up on 4 years of cardiology salary, which is a lot, because I care about this path. In order to offset this, the NIH funds us. My medical school is entirely paid for, and I receive a good stipend, a living stipend to support myself. We're also eligible for public service loan forgiveness, as well as the NIH loan repayment program. So I have a lot of colleagues that have started families during, I'm in my 30s and, thinking about the same things. A lot of my colleagues have started families, and these loans will help sort of offset some of these costs. And then lastly, I just want to emphasize sort of the outcomes. AAMC recently did an outcome survey, and 60% of physician scientists will remain in academia, but there's many, many, many different paths. You can work at biotech, startups, consulting. You can work in public health as well as industry. Most of us will spend 50 to 75% of our time doing research and 25 to 50% of our time seeing patients. You do not need to have all of this figured out right now. Really let your curiosity drive you and find good mentors that'll support you. And then I like the stat, just given the choice, 80% of MD PhD graduates surveyed say they would repeat their program. MD PhDs are some of those passionate people that I've met. I really loved in an environment surrounded by folks that are so excited about the work they do and are really excited about delivering this back to our patients. And I'll leave my email address there as well. You guys are more than welcome to reach out to me with any questions. And this is just some of the electron microscopy images I collected recently of a tiny little protein in your heart.
Monica, thank you. Thank all of our panelists. Such interesting, thoughtful presentations for everything from the most abstract questions of, is this what I'm meant to be down to the most concrete. How do I make this happen, and can I afford it? All of the things we hope we would get out of this panel. I'm going to turn the proceedings over to Ann Wise to take you through the questions, and I will be back with you at 2 o'clock for the mentoring session. And I hope you have a excellent session. Until then, again, to our panelists, thank you all for your insights and for sharing with us and for your lives of service and what you have dedicated yourselves to and to our country. Thank you all, and I'll see you at about 2 o'clock.
All right. So in our remaining time, we're going to ask questions of each panelist. And Trey, would you begin us and ask your question for Shane?
Sure. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Captain Cooper. As a fellow upstate New Yorker, I'm definitely seriously considering Cornell and love that area of New York. So my question is, what are like the advantages of going to smaller law school like Cornell with really good student to faculty ratios as opposed to larger ones that you might have more like larger class sizes and like and obviously it's not going to be a one size fit all answer for everyone, but what in your mind are the advantages of going to a smaller school?
Thanks for your question, Trey. Appreciate that. Yeah, like you said, there wouldn't be a one-size-fits-all answer. I'll describe it this way. I think that every learner and person knows how they would thrive in an institution and what matters to them. And so with a small school like ours, we're relatively small, about 215 or so students per class. We're in a isolated geographic area, so we're not surrounded by a large metropolitan area like New York City. So what that really means is that the community bonds pretty quickly with each other. Not a ton of students are from Ithaca, New York, so they're all coming from around the country and around the world to a new location. And then in that JD cohort, they're really making friends, networks, and people that they're going to rely upon as alums in the legal profession for years later. So you really do build this nice, strong sense of community without necessarily the outside distractions of friend groups or family members or established social scenes within, a metropolitan area if you're already from that city. So those are definitely some pros. A lot of exposure to our faculty because they also geographically coalesce behind the community at the law school. So they practice there, they workshop there, they research there, they're there present in office hours with the students. So all of the things that you can imagine are great benefits. Stronger letters of recommendation for clerkship opportunities or other type of opportunities. But I'll be real, the cons is that it's small. So everybody knows everybody. There is always drama in any grad school or any school, frankly. And I always advise my students to, minimize the drama part. So you can't be anonymous. You can't fly under the radar. Everybody knows everybody. I think that has a nice self-regulation feature in the community. It's harder to be a jerk to each other if you're not anonymous and you're going to be around each other. But if you are wanting to be a part of kind of a larger group with more exposure and maybe in a larger community setting where it's beyond just the law school, that would be a con, to be frank, about a school like ours. So I answer that in a more broad way so that for you and others here listening, think about grad school or a law school, it is important to think through, do I feel like I would thrive and succeed at this location? And then also the longer game of how does this promote my career? How does this promote my network and opportunities down the road? I hope that helps.
Thank you so much.
Great. Anne, would you like to ask your question for Angel?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you to all the panelists. This has been super great to just gain more insight. And Angel, you mentioned thinking about a master's program, like specifically targeted towards research. And I've always thought of like a career in research tied to a PhD. So I was wondering if there are benefits of doing a master's or drawbacks if you want to pursue research instead of a PhD.
Well, I would just generally say, and I will offer my email as well because I have connections in these schools. So, but I would generally say if you want to do research, you should get a PhD. If at the master's level, I think MPPs or MPAs you can do, well, especially MPPs, you can do research at a think tanks or local government, because we do have people that do research. Like in our police department, we have researchers. So there are places you can do research, but if you want to do serious research, you should take the time to learn dissertation level type research. and work on your dissertation with a faculty advisor. You just get more time to learn how to do studies and, the things you need to do to be more effective at research.
Awesome. Thank you.
Aisha, would you like to ask your question of Monica?
Yeah. Thank you all so much for coming to speak with us. And Monica, I'm interested in potentially pursuing an MD PhD in the future. So, my question is, you mentioned first you went to industry and now you're pursuing your MD PhD. At any point, did you consider maybe pursuing an MD JD, since you're also interested in public service work, or maybe a JD PhD. And in addition to that, you recommended gap years, and that could be very valuable for students interested in that, not even just the medical field. Is there anything you would recommend students not to do during a gap year? Because we get a lot of recommendations for what to do, but what's something we definitely should not be doing? And then lastly, what are your thoughts on pursuing a PhD first, and then going back to MD as kind of your gap years? Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for your enthusiasm on MD PhD programs. We'll be really lucky to have you as part of the workforce someday. Personally, I did not consider a JD. Law wasn't something, no shade to the law folks out there, but wasn't something I was interested in pursuing in the long term. I do know an MD PhD JD we have in our alumni network. He completed his MD PhD and then got a JD. He now works in patent law, which I don't entirely know if you need all three of those degrees to work in patent law, but it's certainly a possible path to combine. We do have an MD JD program at our institution. And most folks I know end up working in some degree of policy or something of that sort. But that's the most I can speak to that. Regarding anything that you should not do during your gap years, that's a good question. I can't think of anything in particular besides just sitting on your butt. The thing we really want to see is folks who are excited and passionate about doing something. So as long as you have something that you're excited about that you can talk about, and you can bring up in interviews and bring up in essays, that passion really comes through. So the only thing I'd say is try if you can to get some research experience if you really are interested in MD PhD programs. The NIH postbac is a really great feeder. I'd really recommend it. But beyond that, just enjoy your time, take some time off before school, because once you get into medical school, it is full speed ahead. And then lastly, thoughts on getting your PhD first, then your MD. I generally would not recommend it, solely for the reason that you will be paying for your medical school. So that's looking at $200,000 to $400,000 that you did not need to spend if you are committed to pursuing an MD PhD. There are significant advantages to pursuing the combined degree. We get so much more support from the NIH. We get so much more advising, having the combined program as opposed to pursuing one than the other. So take the time for yourself to answer the questions. Do I want to practice? Do I want to pursue research? And if you've confidently answered yes to both those questions, I would really encourage you to apply to a combined program rather than doing a PhD first, because you will end up spending a lot of money that you did not need to spend.
Thank you so much.
Ben Jones, would you like to ask your question of Shane?
Yes, for sure. Hey, all, I'm Ben. I'm a student at UNC, so I love to see another fellow North Carolinian with Angel. But my question was for Shane, and it was, what advice would you give to an applicant who hopes to pursue a federal clerkship after law school? And do any specific previous professional experiences or certain approaches to law school make candidates especially prepared for federal clerkships? Thanks.
Sure. So thanks for the question, Ben. In my opinion, there isn't one pre-law school experience that you need to worry about doing to make yourself more competitive for a clerkship. If you are interested, of course, then doing some sort of internship or work in the legal system, whether it be in the court, which is, possibility as an internship before law school, I think it can be helpful because you have a little more, let's say, familiarity with how a court operates, maybe with judges that you might interact with in an internship, maybe some networking. So that would certainly help, but it isn't something that I'd say that you must do. What's, I think, much more important is what you do when you get to law school. So for clerkships, generally speaking, you need to do well academically. So you really want to focus on your studies and perform as best as you can academically, and then also building relationships with faculty. That can happen in a couple ways. If you succeed academically in a 1L class, which are all graded through anonymous exams, if you do really well, then you'll be able to go to those 1L faculty members and maybe build more rapport, and then they'll be able to write a very strong letter for you because of your academic performance. Or maybe you'll become a research assistant or a teaching assistant for those professors or other professors in your upper division 2L, 3L years. But basically, great academic excellence to the best you can, good relationships with faculty members. They'll then help you with letters of recommendation, which are very important from faculty for judges and for clerkships. The other nuance is you want to be very much tied in with your career development office at any law school. Applying to law school clerkships is nuanced. It's different depending on the judge. It used to be more regulated, but it's now a lot more varied in its approaches. And so you need to have people that know the system to help you navigate that. So usually at most law schools, they have a judicial clerkship faculty committee, but they'll have a judicial clerkship director who will know the ins and outs of how to do this, along with some recent students, 3Ls or graduating alums who are now clerks. It's great to talk to a young clerk who's just right out of law school and they can tell you how they did it. It's something, though, you want to get on top of. Probably, let's say, second semester of your 1L year that you're going to info panels and really focusing in on.
Thank you.
Angeline, would you like to ask your question for Angel?
Yes. My question, my name is Angeline and I'm from Wisconsin-Madison, but my question is mostly related to like the financial aspects. A lot of what we hear is that if you want your graduate studies to be funded, to not pursue a master's and instead pursue a PhD. But my question is like, do you know of like opportunities to get your master funded, or like what are the scholarships available, or is your advice also just to pursue the PhD to get it funded?
No, my master's was paid for, so there are opportunities for internships and fellowships. And I have something that I didn't get into it before, but if you're planning to seek out financial support for scholarships, it's essential that you start early, look often. And I got some research options. So something called MyScully, MyScholly, is supposedly an excellent, specifically designed scholarship resource but you can't go wrong with Google either. Then there was another option called Scholarship Universe. It's a popular tool, and that is a resource of choice for Ohio State University, John Glenn College of Public Affairs. As an example, all admitted students at John Glenn are eligible for a scholarship from anywhere from $1,000 to $12,000 annually. So it's important to know that unlike undergraduate scholarships, graduate scholarships don't reoccur every year, so they don't automatically renew. So that was one of the things that I meant to mention, but glad you asked the question. And, they'll have my email, so you can send me an email and I can put you in touch. If there are specific universities you're interested in attending, just email me and I'll put you in touch with somebody there.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, certainly.
Monica, you talked a lot about the interview process. You mentioned that a few times. Could you just talk very briefly about any examples of either best practices or some disastrous interviews that you've seen that some of our students could benefit from someone's previous missteps?
Yeah, absolutely. Interviews, like I said, run typically August through March. You'll get invited from schools. And thankfully now most of them are on Zoom, so that's the nice bit. You can do this all from the comfort of your own home. It used to be that we'd all have to fly to all these medical schools, which would really accrue a tremendous cost. Typically, you'll have a separate interview day for the MD program and then for the MD PhD program. MD programs will often do these sort of multiple mini interview styles where you're meeting with multiple faculty in like 10 to 15-minute periods and sort of thinking through ethical questions and reflecting on some of your background. On the MD PhD side, you're typically meeting with directors of programs, students like myself, as well as researchers you're interested in. I was asked to give a few chalk talks at some institutions. So I would have a whiteboard behind me. I would talk about my research and ask questions. As far as anything disastrous that I've seen students do, I really like to talk. I think for an interview, trying to develop concise answers to questions and being sure you're not rambling is really important. There's a balance between having a canned answer and having a prepared answer. So you're going to get the same types of questions over and over. Why do you want to pursue an MD, PhD? Why are you interested in medicine? What is the research that you've done? Why are you interested in research with our institution? And taking the time in advance to just sort of reflect on those questions can help you to answer them in a brief enough span of time that it feels impactful. Beyond that, I think just really your passion and curiosity comes through. So making sure that you're excited and really excited and prepared to speak with the people that you'll speak with. So you'll typically get told in advance who the faculty that you are meeting with are. Do a quick Google, read their websites, at least have a general understanding of the research they do, and it'll really sort of inform the discussion.
Well, I would just like to thank our panelists. I can't believe we're already at the end of our time. We really appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your experiences, your public service examples that you've already had and that you hope to do. So we really appreciate it and thank you very much. I would just wanted to know if for any students whose questions we didn't get, would it be possible for us to email them to the panelists later, just for some quick responses? Well, students, I think if you'd like to just hop on very quickly and say thank you. I think it's always nice when people hear from you directly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.